What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 730. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. Joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how was Christmas over at your place?
It was great. We had a great time. The kids enjoyed their presents. We enjoyed watching them play with the presents. Yeah, it was good stuff.
Did you get anything cool? Speaking of kids enjoying their presents.
Did I get anything cool?
Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, my brother got me a bottle of mezcal, which is cool. It's very smoky. I do like that.
I know what that is.
And I got an advent calendar of socks. So 12 days of socks leading up to Christmas, which I enjoyed too.
That's pretty good. I got one of those meat thermometers that has
I got one too. I got a meter.
Do you know the one I'm talking about? It has like 7 or 8 different sensors on the sensor part of the thermometer.
Oh no, that I didn't get.
Yeah. So the one I got, this is obviously an aside, but it's the holidays and we like to goof around a little bit during the downtime here. You know how normally thermometers that you put in the meat to measure them while they're cooking, they take a measurement at the end of the thermometer. Yeah. So you have to kind of get it into the coolest or the meatiest part of the meat. And that can be difficult and it can lead to some kind of weird reading sometimes. But this one, they designed it so that there's 8 sensor points along the whole thermometer. So it'll tell you the coolest part inside the meat, the warmest part, and it even has one that's on the outside of the thermometer that'll tell you what the temperature is in the oven or the cooking vessel that you've got going. Pretty sweet, cool. Right? Yeah. And then it goes to an app and blah, 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 blah. So report to follow on that one. I'll let you know how it works. But it sounds like something that might be needed at the Scott-Vargas household.
Yeah, no, it seems pretty reasonable.
For your smoking and all that kind of stuff. So we've got, we love doing this show every year. This is the Limmies. We're going to be giving away our Limmy Awards this year to a variety of different categories. And so kick back and relax. That's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing the Limmies. Before we get started on the actual Limmies, though, we want to say thank you to each and every one of our Patreon supporters. Another great year for us on Patreon, and really it's much appreciated. I've said it a lot of times this year and in the past, but it's really true. You know, Patreon for a lot of content creators, including us, is kind of the backbone, right? Because sponsorships, they can come and go, and, things can change as far as that goes, but your core audience that supports you is really the way that shows like ours continue for as long as they have. I mean, we've been on for, 15 years or something crazy? Like it's been forever, right? And that's the thing is that, you can do a show like ours for a good long run, but then something will come along, right, that knocks you down, or that, sponsorship stuff happens, or, life stuff or life situations change and that kind of stuff. And that's where things like Patreon just make it so that you're like, nope, we're going to keep going. We got our people, the monetary part is underpinning it on some level. And it makes it so that you keep doing shows like this. That's why I actually support 5 or 6 things on Patreon, just because, I want to see those things continue to exist. And with that in mind, we just wanted to say thank you for another great year from everybody who supports us over there. If you'd like to, it's patreon.com/limited resources. Also, we want to say thank you to our sponsor, Ultimate Guard. They came on just a couple of months ago, and it's been really cool. When Luis and I were looking for a new sponsor for the show, Ultimate Guard was the first idea we had. It was just like, let's talk to them. Like we went to them, by the way. that's how much we wanted to work with Ultimate Guard, just because Luis has a prior relationship with them with stuff with CFB and Team CFB and all that. And a bunch of Magic players that had good interactions with them. And on top of it, we just love their product. It makes it really easy to come on the show and talk about, that kind of stuff, because they make the best stuff and we don't have to beat around the bush about that. If you need sleeves, deck boxes, ways to organize your cards, ways to transport your collection, all of that kind of stuff, you can hit up Ultimate Guard. You can check out their products on their website at ultimateguard.com. And then you can go to your local game store or your favorite online retailer to find the products you want and pick them up. And we can't recommend them highly enough. Basically anything you get from them is going to be awesome. And it's going to do the job that you needed to do to protect your valuable cards. I mean, it's just a fact that if you get crappy sleeves and they jam up when you shuffle, you can bend up a card or, cause some damage that you may not be aware of. And also they're just a pleasure to use. There's that factor too. Just like these are, like we like the katana sleeves quite a bit, and they're just really nice to shuffle. They're very smooth shuffling, but they tend to last longer than the other smooth shuffling sleeves. So thank you, Ultimate Guard, for your sponsorship. And again, if you want to check them out, it's ultimateguard.com, and you can check them out on Twitter and everywhere else too. One of the cool perks that you get for being a patron, by the way, they call them members now, by the way, Luis, they changed it. But anyway, is you get access to the Patreon question of the week thread. And so I put up a thread every few months, somewhere around when a set comes out, or sometimes I'll let it ride for a little longer, and we'll go through and answer one question per show. This one comes from Nate, who says, loving the LSV vintage cube videos, and I think they have really helped me get better at cube. I feel like Luis knows his archetype pretty quickly most drafts. How do you guys feel about the concept of staying open when it comes to cube? Is it more important to lock in on a strategy in the first few, because the first few picks are so powerful in general in comparison with like a standard draft format? He says, I ask this as someone who often ends up in multicolor goofball decks rather than focused decks.
Oh, it's kind of tricky. So it really is context dependent, more so than in a normal set, because cube has some cards where I'll fight pretty hard to use them. Mm-hmm. For example, if I first pick an Entomb or a Tarian Academy, like if I first pick Entomb or second pick Entomb, I'm going to try pretty hard to go into Reanimator because Entomb is just busted and Reanimator is obviously the place you use it. Likewise, if I get an early Tarian Academy, I'm going to try my best to draft an artifact deck because these cards are like 10 out of 10s when you have them going. The question is, when you have something that's a little less committal, like for example, if I started with a Pluto Delta and a Swords to Plowshares, then yeah, I would feel like I had a pretty decent amount of flexibility. So that's the sort of thing where it really depends on how strong your cards are. But I think there's a lot of cards that push you pretty fast into an archetype because cube isn't really one where it's a little different from a normal set in the sense that you don't really run short on playables, and even being in the same colors as someone doesn't matter as if you're in different archetypes. If you're drafting blue-black control and I'm drafting blue-black Reanimator, like sure, we both want Memory Lapse or Remand or Thoughtseize, but cards like Entomb or Animates, especially the mid-animates like Life, Death, or Exhume, the blue-black control deck's not even going to look at those, and the Reanimator deck's going to scoop them up. A card like Frantic Search goes in Reanimator, doesn't go in Control, whereas Cryptic Command is a lot more interesting for control decks. So
right.
Overall, I would say if you have an archetype-defining card, Entomb, Academy, Sneak Attack, Hull Breacher, Draw 7, Fast Bond, that sort of thing, I'm a lot less likely to move off that. But when I start with a naturally flexible thing, like something like a fetch land, a removal spell, Remand or Memory Lapse are great examples of like these can go wherever. So I think that you just kind of have to balance that. And if you see me start with one of those linchpins, then I tend not to move off it that often just because the reward is so great for staying. Yeah. But if I start more flexible, then clearly that's kind of what you're going after.
Yeah, for me, I kind of put the picks and my early picks into kind of three broad categories that some of which I'm able to move away from and some of which I'm not. The first one are just individually powerful cards, right? If I get an Ancestral Recall, that card will be in my deck. Like I don't necessarily have to be base blue. I don't care if I'm, mono red or mono white, like that card's going to be in my deck. I will prioritize splashing it. And that is something that you can just choose to do. It's almost impossible that if you first pick a single color card that you can't get it into your deck by the end of the draft if you choose to do so. You are going to have to give up some pick equity to do it sometimes, pick up some fixing and stuff. But those type of cards are just in. And then other ones are 1-2 punches or maybe, small groupings of cards that work well together. Like Luis mentioned, draw 7s plus the cards that punish them, like, Orcish Bowmasters or Hull Breacher, Leovold to a slightly lesser extent, and then with these other cards, right? Narset. I want those. I look at those as groupings where I'm trying to like group these cards together, but within those can be in a shell that looks a lot different from draft to draft, but that doesn't mean that like I'm going to run Hole Breacher, Time Twister, and Narset or whatever. Even if those aren't really the primary focus of the deck overall. And then there's cards that go into usually one or maybe two archetypes, but they actually lead you into that archetype. Cards like typically a lot of the aggressive cards fit this, Thalia or Esper Sentinel or something like that. Those are not cards that I'm just looking to kind of like, well, I'm just going to be playing this, right? Like that is not necessarily true, right? If I have an Esper Sentinel, that's a good card in mono white or maybe in like a blue-white tempo deck or something like that. But there's a good chance I don't play it. So that's actually a more committal card in a weird way because I might have to let go of it. And when it comes to those types of cards, those types of broader strategies that require a whole bunch of cards to support a thing, then those are the ones that I'm more concerned about. I actually value them a little bit lower normally because they are more committal. Where when I take these other cards that can either be put into a shell that fits the one, call it the 2 to 4 card combos that I have in there, or they're just so individually powerful that if I can make the mana, I'm going to put it in my deck no matter what. Well, those ones are easier for me to grab onto, and then I can figure out what goes around them. I did want to mention the multicolor. Oh, he didn't say goofball. He said good stuff decks. That's funny. Because that actually is where I wanted to go with it, which is that I will say that, having watched all your videos and stuff, Luis, that actually is an interesting take on it because I view your drafting style as generally very fluid in the sense that I think your hidden strength, like I think one of the things that you're absolutely best at, and I see it when I watch your opponents play as well, that you have a definite edge on it, is your mana bases. Man, they're freaking good. Like, when to, what lands to go for, you're always aware. Okay, I've got this Polluted Delta, and then I'm going to pick up this Savai Triumph, and that gives me white or whatever. You always have it in your head. It comes to your head right away. Like, I want to pick up this card, this land, because it'll open up these other colors to me. And, I would say that a lot of your non-focused decks fit that description. They're these sort of amalgamations of combinations of cards, but they're underpinned by really good mana. How important do you think that is when you're drafting, especially that style?
I think if you want to play the 5-color decks, it's totally legit to do that, but you got to prioritize fetch lands, dual lands, and triumphs. And when you see me, it's funny, you could see me playing like a 2 to 3 color deck, like blue, black, splash red, or blue, black, and I'm like, kind of like freaking out because I have no duels. I have like one Watery Grave and that's it.
Yes.
Whereas when I start in a draft and typically a lot of the drafts that I don't have a lot of really powerful cards to start with. You
take a fetch.
I'll take a fetch land, and then from there, I'll just do my best to. Basically, you get to figure out what mana you need, and if you start with if I start with a fetch land and then take like a decent card of whatever, a single color, and then take another fetch land, I kind of feel like I can go wherever, because if you have 2 to 3 fetches, a triumph, and 2 duels, like you can play 4 or 5 colors. Mm-hmm. The problem is if you try doing that without prioritizing the lands, it doesn't end up working out very well.
Yeah. I see that. That is how I would describe your baseline archetype. And then if you can grab onto a more focused one, you will do that. Like you will go, okay, well, we're doing Reanimator. And then, every card that you have kind of cares about, getting a card in the graveyard, being something awesome to get back, or being a way to get it back, for example. Okay, let's do the Limmies, Luis. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we could start with a hotly contested category of most valuable contributor.
Oh, yeah.
This would be the guest.
Who won this last year?
What's that?
Who won this last year?
Oh, that's actually a good question.
I can look it up.
That was TBS. Which is funny because he is one of the people I think we are most likely to award it to. I actually posted a poll on Twitter to see what people thought, and I think that this year I've got to give it to Sirkovitz.
He killed it.
His episodes every quarter or every set, basically, where we talk about data, is just such a such an interesting angle to add, and especially valuable because a lot of people use 17 lands. It's a great resource, including us. But it's also one that you have to use right. And having Sirkovitz on makes me a lot more confident that that's happening.
Me too. I remember when 17 lands came out and we started getting this data, and I was really excited. But if you go back and listen to the first few times that we talked about it, one of the themes that I tried to hit in those episodes and have continued to is this idea of kind of with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like this data has the ability to make us better, more informed drafters. And almost as equally, it has the ability to make us much worse. Like you can actually take this stuff and use it to make yourself worse at this, which is a very strange idea to think of, that more data could be worse. But if you misinterpret this and then start applying it as if it were the truth, as if the thing that you interpreted it as was right, you can really set yourself up for some failure. And that's why I really love having Sirkovitz on, because I trust his opinions and I trust his methods. And I know that, you know, he knows what he's doing and he knows how to guide us through these things. And one of the things I've really appreciated about him as well is we kind of get these two, like a zoomed in and a zoomed out look from him when he comes on usually. One of them is the zoomed in, which is kind of what's been going on this set, right? Some cards that have stood out to him, maybe some archetype shifts that he's noticed, and then also he's just a maniac drafter. So it's just fun to hear what kind of decks he likes, because he always likes one quirky deck that he kind of gets hooked on. And I like that too. But then he'll often do this thing. And I love this, man. This to me is like, this is the dream of what 17 lands can provide, which is that he has a question, right? It's a question, you know, that we've probably all had. And, you know, we talked about a few of them on the show, the last show that he was on, you know, where it's this broad strokes kind of just, you know, is it actually better to run 18 lands? You know, let's dive in, right? And then he can actually go through and figure out, you know, the one that we talked about on the last show, which I thought was really great. The topic, that article that he wrote and stuff, was about speed of the format. And he was just like, well, what does it actually mean that a format's fast? Because, you know, there's sort of a baseline assumption that it just means that it's aggressive. And he looked into the numbers and he's like, well, that is one of the reasons, but there are other reasons that a format could be fast. And he broke it down for us. And what does that actually mean? And that's really interesting, because I just don't know how we would have really been able to come to those conclusions without, you know, the data and the proper methods that he uses to do it. And I just love that. And, you know, he's always open to us too. Like he'll say like, hey, if you guys want me to look something up or do a deep dive, you know, let me know. And we're always like too far behind to actually get it ahead in enough time. But, you know, if we have a question like that, you know, I listened to a YouTube video that was a sports data analyst. He worked in the NBA and he was answering questions from Twitter, you know, and it was really great. I mean, it's just, you know, stuff like, what's the most efficient shot in basketball? Right. And he's like, well, we actually know that. Right. And then, you know, somebody says like, you know, something about baseball. Well, does this stat really matter? Why do we track wins for pitchers? Right. And it's like, oh, he's like, well, this is what it shows and this is what it doesn't show. And it's like being able to just ask those sort of general questions like that, I think is really cool. And that's what Sirkovitz, you know, turbocharges us on. So congrats, Sirko. A well-earned Limmy for you this year.
The runner-up, unsurprisingly, is TBS.
I mean, TBS could win this every year, you know, realistically, if he wanted, like...
We have a ton of good, awesome guests every year, and I'd like to, of course, thank them. Ryan Spain came on this year. Ben S came on this year. Death Sea came on this year.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm missing anyone else, but we had a lot of awesome guests.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming on the show. We do appreciate it. It's always fun to have other perspectives on there.
Well, the Hungriest Co-Host Award goes to, you know, your number 7 goes to me. So you are runner up.
Oh, congratulations.
Unsurprisingly, the tallest co-host award, also for, you know, the same number of years,
I did
goes
it
to
again.
You. Congrats!
I went to Christmas and I hugged my aunt, and she and I get this all that she did. You grow? You know? Did you get tall? No, I didn't. But she's like pushing 80, so she might have gotten a little smaller. I don't know.
Yeah. The MVP this year, most valuable producer, goes to Jeff, who's unfortunately not with us. He had holiday plans, but we'll inform him.
He could not be here to accept his award, but producer Jeff, he's behind the scenes for us. He helps us out with our stream and the video version of the podcast, and he's fantastic. He also is kind of a sounding board for us. When we chat before the show, for patrons, they'll know because we do the unedited version so you can hear him talking to us and stuff. But we'll run stuff by him, just kind of like, hey, would this be cool? Or do you like this? Or does this look better? Or, are we allowed to say this? And that kind of stuff. And and we use him as our litmus test. And he always does a great job. Thanks, Jeff, for another year with us here on LR. We love having you.
The best set of the year award, kicking it off with a banger, March of the Machine. March of the Machine was the best set. And to refresh your memory, Brothers War was last year, but this year we had March of the Machine, we had Woe, we had Phyrexia All Is One, we had Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and we had Lord of the Rings. I do count that one. And I believe March of the Machine is I think, pretty clear winner there. In fact, we had two sets recently that I think, I like, Lost Caverns a decent amount, but a lot of people don't. And certainly Phyrexia All Is One is not. Well, actually, it is going to win an award this year. So I was going to say it's not winning any awards, but that's not entirely true.
Just not this particular award. Yeah.
I want to give a runner-up shout out to best set of the year. It didn't really count, but I wanted to mention it. Vintage Cube. This did feel like Year of the Cube.
Year of the Cube.
If I were to buy and sell stocks, I think Cube stocks are rising. It's Daybreak's leaning into it more for Magic Online. I mean, obviously, I do cube drafts every day for YouTube. It is the sort of thing where we can just cube all the time now, whether it's on Magic Online or via, Discord or whatever. And everyone's just talking about cube. I mean, I know that's partially self-curating because I'm so into it. I find other people to talk to about it. But I've seen a lot more from even people in the For You page on Twitter, which I like scrolling actually. Mm-hmm. Random people just talking about cube. It feels like because it's more accessible now, it's become a bigger part. And honestly, I think that the cube limited commander constructed analogy is somewhat there. It's not the same. I
do too.
But I think cube feels like, in some ways, commander feels to me like a celebration of just every Magic card that, Magic has to offer that you can play with your friends in a casual setting and kind of craft that experience to be whatever you want. Cube is kind of like that. It's all the cards ever printed. You can use them however you want. You can make a peasant cube or a pauper cube. You can make cubes of a specific block, basically a Khans draft block if you want. You can make a mono red cube. You can make a cube that's got tons of combos. You can just do plain old vintage cube, which is kind of the equivalent, but probably would be high level or high power level commander, right? Is where people are just using 30 years of Magic to make the best decks possible. Vintage cube is kind of all the cards that are best to draft. But so the part that really I think draws the parallel the best is you get to curate your own experience. Yeah. Commander's about playing Magic the way you want it, from hyper competitive CDH tournaments to playing Commander with the pre-cons plus or minus some cards at the local store or at the kitchen table. And Cube kind of feels like that, where I've obviously kind of settled onto a more competitive end of Cube because that's the kind of thing that appeals to me, but you can have whatever Cube experience you want. And this really feels like it's, Cube has really come to fruition at this point. It was always a thing. It's been getting more popular. I would be shocked if it wasn't more popular. I mean, now than it has been ever. There are 10,000 people in the Magic Online Cube draft leagues.
It's definitely the most. Yeah, and I agree. It still gives you, similar to Commander, and some of the things that's pushed are nostalgia and the social factor, and Cube can give that too. Also, we should give a shout out to Alpha Frog, right?
Totally.
He's built something really cool here.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, that's the Discord's server I play on. 40's Cube Drafts is run by, it's actually two guys, Alpha Frog and David Part, Timrod. And those two guys, kind of run the server, though at this point I help mod it as well too, because I'm so invested. But it has let me cube with awesome players basically whenever I want. And it's grown into a community. I like those guys. I'm actually looking forward to seeing them, at events and whatnot. I put an open invite to anyone in the Cube Discord, for example, to before RC Denver to come to a barbecue I'm throwing, that sort of thing. So,
oh man, I want to see those
guys
cubes
like
pop off.
Mac and Theo and Slacks, just like Sandy Dog, all the names you recognize if you watch the videos are becoming friends of mine because I interact with them, and that has been a blessing this year for sure.
Yeah, so I just think that's really cool because it's another corollary, by the way, to Commander in that. Okay, Cube itself is a player-generated format. You know, Wizards did not come up with that, similar to Commander. And then also, you know, people like Alpha Frog Timrod, you know, getting a community going that's more structured, right? That's like you know, there's some like similarities there between that and what they did with the RC and that kind of stuff, where it's like, or what is it called? Is that what it's called? Rules Committee? Yeah. And, you know, where it's like, there's a little bit of codification going on, but not enough so that it's like, this is what this is and this is how you do it and that's it. It's kind of like you can curate it yourself, but it gives you a platform from which to go. And I just think that, you know, that's a lot of time and effort that those guys have put in to get that server up and running and make everything work. And obviously, you know, you starting your YouTube channel and kind of coming in there, you know, is a turbocharge for that. But all it is showing more people what an awesome thing it is. So,
I mean, I just love Cube more than any other way to play Magic. And honestly, I would have gone to a lot fewer Pro Tours if this was all available. I'm pretty happy with the timing of everything because I'm glad I got to go to all those Pro Tours, but I could totally see this derailing my pro career because it's hard to overstate how much I enjoy solving the puzzles that is Cube and playing with these cards.
Yeah.
So it has been a complete renaissance for me.
I have a question for you. Where do you see it going? Like, we're drawing these corollaries to Commander, and it would have been really difficult like 8 years ago to say, oh, Commander's going to be the number one thing in this game. Like, it is going to be what many people think of when they think of Magic. Right. Where do you know, Cube is having a moment. Like, it really is. Your YouTube channel, the stuff that Alfrog and Timrod have done, the stuff that Magic Online has done to push it. It really does feel like a thing. Do you see it going a direction? Like, is this it?
So it's an interesting question because I hadn't really thought of that before this, but I guess drawing that parallel kind of sends us down that path.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, Cube takes more effort to get going than Commander, especially in person. You have to have a physical cube. Someone has to do that, and that's a lot of work. I'm in the process of like overhauling mine and getting it updated. But every time a new set comes out, there's new cards you want to add. So it obviously takes a lot of work, and you have to get 6 or 8 people that you can play with fewer. But 6 is like kind of the minimum I like to have a really fun cube experience. Obviously, if you have to play with fewer, then that's fine too. But online, it's kind of the reverse, where I think online it's actually a lot easier to cube than it is to play Commander because you have these programs. First of all, when you can just join the queue on Magic Online, that's it. It's so easy. It's just all there. You don't have to own any of the cards. Even for us, when we jump through some hoops by drafting on Draftmancer and having to either rent or have all the cards to play with, that's still like relatively easy. It's just all online, Whereas Commander, like to play CDH, people are doing webcam tournaments, and I've seen people with these like webcam cheating scandals, and it's just like,
oh no, really?
I mean, come on, like it's ridiculous. But so I think Cube still is a little bit more on the competitive side in general. Like I would say that most games of Cube are played a little more competitively than games of Commander. And to be clear, this has no comment on the skill it takes or the dedication it takes. It just, Cube is a little bit more of a 1v1, I'm trying to win the game setting. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of Commander games are who wins the game is a very small part of the whole like experience. When you can't tell me that people having 3-hour-long Commander games where everyone takes a picture of their board and no one else's, because like what matters is you're kind of getting to have the play experience you want with your deck.
Right.
Winning is just definitely not everyone's first priority. Not that it is in Cube. In Cubes, I often make picks that are because I want to make those picks because I think those picks are fun, but I do care about winning. And I think that Cube, I still find it in general, I think it's a little bit more on the competitive like spectrum like it typically is. It's kind of like not every Cube experience or game is more competitive than every Commander experience game. Clearly not. But the average Cube game, I think, tends to be a little bit more focused on that. Just a 1v1 versus a 4-player thing. Yeah. That's a pretty normal way to go about it.
Yeah.
Where do I think it goes? I think it's going to be a bigger part of Magic Online. That's already like, if you were to think of Magic Online, what percent of its identity is cube now? I think that percentage has just gone up a lot, and not just with people who do it. Just that's what all their announcements are at. When they fired the 64 player, when they put those 64 player single limb draft queues up for Vintage Cube, they fired a ton the first time they put them up, and then they put up 64 player events, and they basically didn't fire. Mm-hmm. And now this new Magic Online Cube, they made a pretty big overhaul, and I think has some good stuff, has some misses. It's, I don't know, the holidays, the 64 player events are a little bit less popular, but the cube leagues are still just going off. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people interact with Magic Online to play cube. It's a cube device.
It's a cube machine. Yeah.
Not anything else. Whereas like 5-10 years ago, Vintage Cube was part of the equation, but not the only part. And then of course, Arena making it the place where I think most people draft the current set on Arena and play Standard on Arena, if for the couple dozen people who still play Standard in the world. And I think Cube is just becoming a bigger part of Magic Online, and I could see it becoming a bigger part of people's live play experiences. Like, you have a local shop, you have someone who has a cube and is going to bring it in. Like, that just turns into a more recurring event and something you can build a community out of.
Great stuff for Cube this year, and we're looking for even more next year. What about, here's a big one. What's the best card of the year?
We got the pleasure of breaking that one, and it is a Bonehorde Dracosaur, which it's got some competition. Like Orcish Bowmasters certainly is a pretty disgusting card, but overall, I mean, I think just the Bonehorde Dracosaur, just a ridiculous card of all told. Have you gotten a chance to play with it? I still haven't gotten a chance to play with it.
No, I only had a chance to play against it, and it was not remotely close. And Circo said that it's the number one card stats-wise as well by a lot, like by a few percentage points. So, yeah, no big deal. We just got the best limited card ever as our preview card this year, so taste it. Best card name. These are real. There's always really creative, great ones. I mean, the people they hire to do the names and the descriptions are just absurd, like geniuses. But man, the ones that for some reason, when you combine like children's candy with like a horror movie, the names that come out of it are just too good. Scream Puff is really like, that's great. Candy Grapple plus the artwork on Candy Grapple plus the fact that it was just a great card is like, that's amazing work.
Candy Grapple is absurd. Like, it is definitely the best. I think when I was looking through all the cards from this year to try to figure out what the best name, as soon as I hit Candy Grapple, I'm like, oh, it's just going to be this whole kind of this whole sequence. Yeah. Because it just is so unbelievably sick.
The juxtaposition of like happy candy with like scary monsters is really good. Minstrosity. I mean, and then what was the art direction on Minstrosity? Like, make something really scary, but it's made out of like Christmas candy or whatever. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I think sometimes I hit a home run, and I gotta say that the Wilds of Eldraine, like Sugar Plum Valley, whatever you call this grouping of cards, the evil candies is just such an awesome hit that it's got to take this category in a landslide.
This one has gotten so depressing. What wins the Limmy for the best mana ward?
Yeah, I actually think it's Horses of the Bruin, and this is the Lord of the Rings card. The bounce 2 creatures, scry 1, get tempted by the ring, and it's not physically a mana war, as in it's not a creature, but this was, I think, the overall best bounce. So it's called Horses. It kind of feels, bounce-ish.
I mean, it just sucks because this type of effect has gone down in value so much because so many of the creatures have really good ETB abilities that, like, oftentimes you're like, all right, I got my big tempo play lined up. And then you look across the board and you're like, don't really want to bounce those particularly. Like, maybe you still take it, but it's not what it once was, where, you were getting sometimes a 2-for-1 out of it and oftentimes just a big tempo setback. horses. What was the biggest beat of the year?
I gotta say, Paul Cheon getting laid off from Wizards is the biggest beat, and all the other folks who got laid off. But of course, Paul's like,
but for us,
it's best
Paul.
friends. So
he's one of our best friends.
He gets to represent them all. But
he also was like my contact at Wizards, by the way.
Yes.
So like, and also, I think he's going to try to see what he can do, but I mean, this is probably going to affect booth stuff on some level. And he's my booth partner at the Pro Tour. So hopefully, he can still do that, but I don't know how that works. So super bummer. Like you said, we're focused on Paul, but this also does go out to everybody that was affected by the layoffs at Wizards. I just still can't believe that happened. Like, I totally understand corporate stuff and layoffs, but like, have you seen the numbers from Hasbro? Like, Wizards is the only company that makes him any money. Like, they should have just said, we're not touching that thing. Like, that is the golden house on the hill and it is untouchable and we'll cut from everything else. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't really feel like qualified to answer exactly, because I think even if Hasbro is a very profitable part of or Wizards is a very profitable part of Hasbro's overall business, that doesn't mean that there isn't cuts that you could make in Wizards, but it does feel pretty unfair. I know.
I would just be scared too if I was Hasbro. I'd be like, if we screw up the Golden Goose, we have nothing. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to cut corners over there. I'm just like, you know what? We'll just live with a little bit of extra fat there, right? Like if that's even the case, I don't know. I like you said, I'm not qualified, of course, either. I don't know all the numbers and all the stuff and how it all looks and how I'm just going to say
historically, come on. Executives have not been overly concerned about killing golden gooses. Yeah, that appears to be the case here as well.
That does seem to be the case.
I think it was a beat. I think a lot of us who love Magic, I guess, would prefer Hasbro not be the owner of it, but that doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, a new one. I've seen this, Limmy.
So this one is the best YouTube channel of the year, and the award goes to Wristwatch Revival.
Wow.
You don't push your channel enough here. I just think it's so sweet. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time watching your channel. I've showed it to a lot of my friends and non-Magic playing family, and they think it's cool, which I think is a pretty neat thing to have. You have managed to, completely unrelated to Magic, have this like kind of phenomenon that people are even copying. It's a mark of a success.
It is crazy. Yeah, thanks for that. It has been another great year for the channel, and I've just been pushing forward on. I had a really cool moment last week, Luis, related to the channel that really kind of hits at the home of it, which is that there was a scammer who was trying to. He basically goes into my comments on Instagram and on YouTube and tries to impersonate me and then tell people, because people will ask me almost constantly, "Will you fix my watch for me?" Right. But when you think about it, I aim for 2 videos a month, like, and sometimes I can hit 3 and sometimes it's 1, but I aim for 2, that's only 24 videos in a year, roughly speaking. And some of the watches are mine. So make that 15 to 20 that I'm taking from the outside at the most. And I get literally thousands, right? So it's really, really tough to try to like sift through all that. And this guy just goes on and says, yeah, I'll fix it. And then what he did was he had people send the watches, but not to him, because I don't believe he's based in the US. And I don't think he knows that if he has them ship it outside the US, that they're going to go, wait a minute, but this guy's in Seattle, cause it says on my Instagram where I'm at and stuff. So he has them send it to like a fake address here in Seattle. And then I got an email or a message from a lady who said, "Hi, my son sent you his watch. Did you get it?" And I said, "No, and I don't know who you are. So that means you probably sent it to a scammer." And so she's like, okay. So she got a hold of the shipping company and they got their watch back. And it turns out her son is 13 years old and he's a big fan of the channel. He watches all the videos, and he had inherited this watch from a close family friend who had passed away. And he had messaged with this scumbag scammer person, and he wanted to get the watch fixed. So when he did get the watch back, which he did, they were able to stop the shipment. I said, well, why don't you send it to me and I'll fix it for you. And so I did. I fixed it on the channel. It took months. It required way more work than we thought, but whatever. And we got it done. I put out the video, and I had been emailing with him off and on, and he was eagerly awaiting the return of the watch, let's just say. But anyway, really nice kid. His name's Wyatt. And it turns out he actually lives in Snohomish, which is, 20 miles north of where I'm at, 30 miles, whatever. It's not very far from here. And so after some emailing back and forth, on the day before Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve, actually, his dad had him come do a quick errand with him. But we set it up so that I would meet him at Starbucks. And I got to meet Wyatt in person and give him his watch back. And then also we started, me and my friend Alex, who's kind of another watch person out here, we started a website to sell toolkits and some of the watches that I fixed and stuff this year. And that launched in November. And I gave Wyatt one of our toolkits too, so that he could try it out for himself. But I got to say, man, it was cool. Like getting to actually meet, like I haven't really met people that listen to the channel outside of like a few random things, but this was like actually a face-to-face with somebody, and a kid no less who listens to the channel. And he's just the nicest kid. And the best part is his dad sent me an email right when they got home. And he said 2 minutes after we got home, and Wyatt already had the kit open and the watch, and he was taking stuff apart and just diving right in.
Dude,
so
that's so sick.
That's
just
great?
Amazing. See that's why I think it's cool to listen to you talk about the watch channel. You're allowed to do that. It's your podcast.
I know. I just, it just doesn't really have anything to do with magic. So anyway, thank you. I gladly accept my award. I was going to say though, that like my channel's been out for a few years now, and yours coming in this summer, and it's been a banger, man. And it's also more relevant. So how do you not win this award? I mean, come on.
I just think that your channel being completely unrelated to magic is just like one of the coolest parts of the whole thing.
Well,
so,
will you accept a runner-up award?
I will accept the runner-up award.
You haven't missed a day, right?
Yeah, I have not yet.
That's incredible.
So I don't plan on it.
I guess
I actually don't have videos scheduled until the end of the year. I have a video scheduled for today and tomorrow, so I need one on the 31st, or I won't end the year with a clean slate. So I'll see what I can do. You got to at least run out the year, yeah. Yeah. The best build around of the year. This is a cool award we all like giving, and I think that Luris Companion has to take it. Luris, it's not the first appearance of Luris, but Luris was on the bonus sheet, the Heroes of the Realm or something. I don't remember what they called it exactly. Legends or whatever it was. It was the March of the Machine bonus sheet with all legendary creatures.
Yeah.
All the companions were there, which was, I think, actually incredibly good. Having the companions as like extra decks to build around, because Luris and Yorion, I successfully built around both of those. Gigantha was a solid card in some decks. I didn't think Karuga was one you should try to build around. Obosh was definitely good if you could get there.
The Evens one?
Garuda. Yep.
Garuda was good.
Kahira, the Orphan Guard, not really a particularly good one. But still, overall, the companions were a slam dunk. And Luris was the most fun. Luris was so cool. You could draft these decks with all these little like small creatures and sack stuff. And it just was like the most fun. You can actually, if you want to scroll back a lot on my Twitter, I posted a 7-win black-white Luris deck I had in March. That was just like one of the coolest decks I've gotten to draft. So,
also, what are the chances we would be talking kindly about companions?
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think for limited, especially once you added the 3 mana, they actually ended up being a pretty reasonable like gameplay piece and design. They just are not particularly good when it comes to constructed, just because they're all horrifically broken. Of course, this is after adding 3 to the cost.
Oh man, this next one. How did you find this next one? That's such a great call. I totally forgot about that card. Sorry to step on you, but I just noticed the next Limmy.
Yeah, so this is the opposite side, the most disappointing build around of the year, and this one is Serum Core Chimera, which
I still think it's good.
No surprise. That's the blue-red, so it's 2 blue-red for like the 2/3 flyer from Phyrexia All Will Be One that gets oil counters when you place non-creature spells, and then you can move 3 oil counters to deal 3 damage. And it just turned out none of those things in that set worked at all, especially this one.
I mean, you remove 3 oil counters, you get a card, right? Or you draw a card and then you can discard a card and then you can nug something for 3. If it's something I can't remember. I think it's just if you discard a card, it does it. That card was just stupid good on paper and it just completely whiffed, mainly because oil did. That's a great find, man. I'm still disappointed about that one. I just had forgotten.
Yeah. Well, that actually dovetails nicely into the worst set of the year.
Oh, God. Talk about
Phyrexia All is One. It just had everything that kind of not even like the drafting populace as a whole hates, which is like super fast. The build arounds didn't work. The mechanics were bad. Like they weren't fun and kind of didn't work. The set just ended up failing on pretty much all axes. Like poison is just not that good of a mechanic. And then the infected, you have to have 3 poison thing, basically didn't work. Mm-hmm. The red green deck was like the best deck, but it was barely because of oil counters. You don't even play a lot of the oil counter cards except when they justify themselves, which is a surefire way to tell that your set's kind of not getting there on the merits. And overall, I think that this was the set I enjoyed the least by far in this whole year. And this wasn't overall the best year for Limited. It wasn't the worst. I guess I don't know which year was. I'd have to go look. Maybe the Avacyn Restored year was a pretty bad one. Just that set was legendarily bad.
Yeah.
We had one of my favorite sets of all time in March of the Machine, but Phyrexia All's One is like one of my least favorite sets of all time. And I think LCI is the most charitable thing you can say about LCI is that it's got mixed reviews. Like overall, I think I would not consider LCI a success, even though I think I had a pretty good time playing it. Lord of the Rings was a very successful set. I think it's a very cool set. I think the color balance was bad enough in terms of how good black was that it did detract some from the set.
Yeah.
But I did like drafting Lord of the Rings. I did a lot of those drafts.
I did too.
I think Woe was...
Flavor hit well too.
Woe was a better set than I gave it credit for, in the sense that it didn't strike with me. I didn't end up enjoying it that much. I think it was a fine set though. Like I don't have like a big complaint about the set. I think it was just like an okay set. And I mean, I guess that is pretty much it. I mean, that we, obviously Cube took up a lot of the space in the set this year, but that's still, I still think having Phyrexia All as One was a kind of rough place to be for a set or for a year of Limited.
Really tough and reviled as well, for Limited at least. What about the worst archetype of the year?
Well, that actually goes to an archetype that hasn't succeeded in I don't know how long. It's blue-green anything. None of the things they tried, whether it's like ramp, which seems like it could work. I guess like battles and transform cards was the March of the Machines one, and that one maybe was carried by blue being the best, but overall you still didn't really draft blue-green very much.
Never. It just does not have an identity. The ramp thing that you mentioned is kind of the closest that you can get, but there's 4 or 5 of the archetypes that have a very solid identity or couple of identities, right? You think green, white, you're like, oh, tokens and +1/+1 counters. You think red, black, you're like, oh, sacrifice stuff, right? You think blue, red, oh, spells, right? Like there's things that jump into mind. Red, white, oh, that's aggro, right? And those ones are very well defined. Blue, black is control. But when you get into the green, black and the green, blue end of the spectrum, it's kind of like, well, graveyard, ramp maybe, there's like some questions, but
every blue-green theme from this year.
Okay. What were they?
So we had Lord of the Rings, we had Scry.
That was
unbelievably bad.
Huge
I'm still
flop.
So mad that at the Lord of the Rings Pro Tour, I drafted the Scry deck. I wheeled the rare Elrond twice, which is a powerful card. As a reminder, this is 2 blue-green for a 4/4. Whenever you scry, you put a +1/+1 counter on up to X creatures, where X is the number of cards you looked at while scrying. And whenever one of your creatures with a +1/+1 counter becomes targeted by your opponent, you draw a card. I had 2 of these, and I wheeled both of them. And it's like, I had like the uncommon blue-green Arwen. I kind of had it all, and
Legolas sucked, I swear it's remember?
Like, okay, well, it reminds me of that scene from Arrested Development where Tobias Funk and his wife were like, our relationship's doing badly. We're going to open it up. And the person they're talking to is like, does that work for people? Well, no, it doesn't work for anyone, but we're different. And it might work for us. Whereas it's like, wow, blue-green Scry never works, but I'm getting every rare and uncommon. Maybe it'll work this time. And then,
I mean, you were forced into it. It's not like you wanted to.
Yeah. And it just didn't work.
And it still didn't work, even under those circumstances. I mean, normally you'd think that, if something's that open, it would work, but no. What was the next blue-green archetype?
So then we had in Phyrexia All is One, we had Toxic, Poison, Proliferate, and it basically didn't work.
And Proliferate didn't do anything, and there wasn't enough of it.
You look at like Tainted Observer, right? The uncommon, 1 blue-green, 2/3 flying, Toxic 1, and you can pay 2 to proliferate whenever a creature enters the battlefield, and it's just not functional.
No.
And that was partially a reflection on Phyrexia that nothing worked, but still. And then you have March of the Machine, where it's like, transform permanents. When your permanents that are transformed, give you bonuses like the 05 flyer that has +1 +0 for each one. Whenever you transform a permanent, do X. Again, didn't really work. Sometimes you would have a playable blue-green deck just because the blue was that strong, and sometimes if green was the second color open, that would be fine. But in general, blue-green was just not a deck. And then you had Woe, where it's like the ramp spell, and even then Troyan Gutsy Explorer, right? 3 mana, 1/3 taps for 2 mana, but you have to play a big spell and as a looter. Looks fine on its face, it just didn't work. And it just turns out adding expensive cards plus ramp spells is an okay combination, right? That's like the classic one of the green decks you can do is you get to ramp into your big spells. Well, what does blue add to that equation? It adds card draw? Well, that's definitely not what you want when you do that. It adds bounce spells? That's not really what you want either. It's okay, but it just doesn't really, they don't mesh well, and the blue-green deck in Woe, again, basically doesn't work, which brings us to LCI, where the blue-green theme is Explore. And well, Explore's not that bad. It just blue and green together. I think it's just fundamentally these two colors are not very complementary. If you look at card draw, you look at bounce, you look at ramp, you look at big creatures and fight spells are pretty much not what blue's got going on at all. Blue has flyers, so it needs good ways to defend itself, but green also has big tramplers, so it needs good ways to defend itself, and neither color is doing great at doing that. And they've tried to staple or to jam these together with a bunch of different themes that make sense for the set. Scrying in Elves or Toxic in New Phyrexia or what have you, and it just has not stuck. Whereas, red, black, fairly complementary, almost to the point where they just do the same thing. They just both kill creatures, but it tends to be a pretty good thing to do in limited. Blue, black has black's removal and blue's card draw and control elements, and that works out really nicely together. Even colors that are not allied, like blue, red, for example, burn spells plus blue's card draw actually works pretty nicely, or blue's tempo plays, so you can have a blue-red aggro deck or a blue-red control deck, and they're both pretty viable. Spells Matter is a classic blue-red theme that basically always works, part of why the Chimera was so disappointing in Phyrexia. And, or red-white, where they're both aggressive, and that kind of is its own thing. Even though red-white does have some misses, like equipment doesn't really work that well, it just turns out that blue-green is just not very good and does not mesh well.
No, and if they try to pump up the individual card quality, then the other color pairs just snipe the good stuff. So I don't know if they need to try to lock down like a hard, this is what blue-green does, as a baseline, and sometimes we riff on it, but they haven't been able to find it. I don't know. I don't have a solution either. Sorry, blue-green. It is my favorite color pair in many ways. Blue-black or blue-green are where I want to be, but it just never, ever seems to be able to keep up. This is an interesting one. Mythic Uncommon of the Year. There's some really good candidates here. Imidane's Recruiter.
Fantastic.
Saruman's Trickery. What do you want to give it to? So
we're going to award it to Zoetic Glyph from Lost Caverns, because that card is just so ridiculous. All the pieces together. It's like, you get a hasty 5/4, sometimes even has like flying, right? You put it on Oaken Southern or and Vigilance. also, when it dies, you discover 3, so you get this like amazing rebate. So on straight win rate, Saruman's Trickery is actually, I think, the highest overall.
Oh, okay.
But I think Zoetic Glyph and Immoden's Recruiter both strike me as more of a Mythic Uncommon. Not that Saruman's Trickery is bad. A counterspell that puts a 1/1 into play, or amasses an army that in a format where blue was good and counters were good, Saruman's Trickery was a really demoralizing card when you got hit by it, and also everything that had a mass on it was just better than it looked. But I think Zoetic Glyph's got to be the winner.
I like that too. This is a good one, and this is a raging comeback for this card as well. Favorite cube card of the year?
Yeah, it's got to be Tarian Academy. This card is...
And you were off Academy, and then you're like, oh, I'll try it out, and now it's become like a signature card for you.
So Academy used to be the kind of card where if you had a busted cube deck, it could make it more busted. Like the kind of deck where you opened a Soul Ring, you got past a Mox in pack 2, you got a Mox Diamond in pack 3, and then like you see Academy 4th pick pack 3, and you're like, oh wow, I've got 7 cheap artifacts. Yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to get a couple more. It wasn't a card that I would be comfortable first picking, and I never did. I think that the cube actually changed enough where it got more cheap artifacts. It got cards like Urza. It got cards like Saheeli, Chrome Shell, Seed Shark, just cards that made tokens, Third Path Iconoclast, Mishra's Bauble, Currency Converter. So it got both cheap artifacts and good artifact payoffs, and now Academy, I think, is one of the best cards in the cube. So. Yeah. And not a card I get past very often, sadly.
Yeah, especially because you
I had a good run there for a couple of weeks where people weren't quite up on it, and I just kept beating people with my 5th pick Academies and what I was first picking if I saw it, and then people started taking it and even hating it when they couldn't play it just because I was so clearly in on that plan. Yeah. It's kind of like how I got to draft Breach Brain Freeze LED for a little while too.
Yeah, I would like to be in the standing by at the draft at your barbecue that you have with the drafters when somebody opens up an Academy. It was like, like it's just, they're going to talk about it for sure. What was the biggest missed theme of the year? There's actually a couple that come to mind for this.
Yeah. I think that overall the biggest miss is the blue-white tap theme in Wilds of Eldraine. To the point where like none of the cards in the theme not only didn't work, but even the cards that are supposed to like draw you into play it were just not cards you should generally take. And just fundamentally it didn't work. If they just attacked with their creatures every turn, you got into a spot where you couldn't even make your cards function. It's ridiculous. I'm actually shocked it kind of went through.
I'm surprised too. There was fundamental. It just that was definitely interesting design space, but to push that hard into it, really revealed quickly that like this doesn't work. Like that this is fundamentally flawed, this strategy. Funny part is that you could still draft that color pair, but the thing you needed to know was that you needed to ignore all the cards that said tap on it because the rest were actually okay.
Charade was the biggest exception, the uncommon, because you'd just play her as a 4-mana 2/3 Frostlinks that drew you a card most of the time.
Yeah.
But yes, in general, like blue-white was actually good and the mechanic was bad. So that is a bigger distinction than blue-green just being bad because it's bad and the mechanics are bad.
Right.
Blue-white was good, just the mechanic didn't get there. Runner-up here, Caves and Lost Caverns, still don't really think it works. Like, I have lost to a Caves deck. A good Caves deck exists, but I don't think you're supposed to go in looking to try to draft Caves or even really leave yourself open to it generally. So yes, I guess if you go for it and it works, that's fine, but it's just not going to happen very often.
That was really disappointing because if you remember the Gates deck being a real highlight in whatever format that was, and when I saw that Caves were going to be a thing, I thought we might be getting a flashback of that. Some of the cards in the Caves deck look similar to cards from the Gates deck as well. So I thought, okay, we're doing this. Like,
love the Gates deck.
Yeah. And then it was like, no, not so much. In fact, not at all. And I tried, and you tried. So no. A couple more to give here. Worst grade of the year?
So there's a bit of a fundamental question when it comes to worst grade of the year. Is it worst grade of the year based on like the knowledge we had at the time, the overall worst grade of the year, the worst in retrospect grade of the year, like, basically how results oriented do we want to be? Because on the one hand, we have your hopeless nightmare grade, which I think is in the running.
It's not in the running.
I didn't write that down because I think
I gave it like a C- or something.
Yeah, you gave it an F and it was like an A. But like,
oh my god.
I think so. For example, for worst grade of the year here, some years we have the grade where it's like, Feldon was a runaway success last year. Like that was clearly. Here we have Hilda of the Icy Crown, which we gave a high build around grade. That's the mythic blue-white, tap build around. Ended up being terrible. That is like in some ways not the worst grade of the year because I think given the information we had, we're going to give that card that grade every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like a mythic rare of an Archetypes theme in a new set that has powerful outputs, we're always going to give it a pretty good grade because those tend to be good. And, the fact that theme basically didn't work wasn't something we knew at the time and wouldn't really have been expected to know. So in that sense, I don't think that's like the worst grade of the year compared to underrating a card which ended up being really good, which we could have guessed was good. Like Hopeless Nightmare. But
oh my God.
Overall, I thought we did a pretty good with the grades this year. I definitely had some misses. I think Hilda being the worst grade of the year is more of a reflection on the set itself than our review process. But I mean, there's definitely a lot of cards like we by no means got everything right, and certainly not arguing that.
No, I think that our process is still good. I think it's very good, actually. I think that for the most part, when we give the grades, we try to include some amount of context, but there's things that we just can't know at that stage. Particularly like speed of the format, is a big one that changes grades really significantly. If I show you like a really solid 5 or 6 drop or something, we could give that a C+ or a B- or something. But if I told you the format's like exceptionally fast, then those cards just universally take a dive, and all of a sudden the 1 drops and the 2 drops go up a lot. So that's just a thing. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say the mechanic of the year, moving on, is Convoke. And that's not a new mechanic, but Convoke and March of the Machines just played out super well. I find it pleasant and pleasing to use all your mana, to use all your resources. Definitely. And Convoke let you set up these turns where you're like, cast this creature, cast this token maker, now tap all of my things to play this the 3/4 flying knight. And that's just a really smooth gameplay experience while also, it just played out really well how it actually played out in practice. So Convoke really teaches you a lot about mana efficiency. It's a good teaching tool. And I really enjoy how Convoke plays, despite it not being like a new mechanic.
Me too. I think that Convoke is one of the very few mechanics that's really excellent at smoothing out problematic parts of the Magic rule set without erasing it, right? We want mana screw and mana flood to exist. Right. We don't want every game to be devoid of that, but we don't want it to be a defining feature of when you play Magic. And things like Convoke can help you cast a few cards in the early game, even if you miss a land drop or 2. You play a 1 drop or a 2 drop, and then you tap them, and you can actually add something to the board and play a game of Magic, where if you had missed your land drop 2 more times in a row, the game's just kind of over. But Convoke is great because it walks that line. If you overdo that and say, all your creatures can tap for mana, so you're never mana screwed again, well, now you start to lose some of the underpinnings of what make Magic great. So yeah, Convoke, I would, try to put it into that evergreen kind of slot where they can just have it on some cards and smooth things out sometimes.
And this isn't a Limmy, but I wanted to mention it because it's neither the worst or the best, but it is new. Battles was a new card type, which we don't get every year. In fact, you rarely get. But I also don't think it was like a runaway success or a failure. It just kind of was Planeswalker light is how it felt like.
Yeah.
Like it had an immediate effect, and now your opponent has this quest to protect this battle that your quest is to destroy it so you can get the backside. They played fine. Like they're okay. They're not like groundbreaking, really. They're not, they didn't blow us away, but they played fine. So yeah, I wanted to kind of give a shout out to Battles, which played totally fine.
They just played fine, yeah. All right, last Limmy.
All right, this is the most valuable episode. And this is interesting because this wasn't an episode that was focused on gameplay or really even a limited format besides the fact that it was about Cube. This is Ryan Spain's appearance talking about Vintage Cube. And the reason I selected this one Cube is going to be a big part of the limited landscape moving forward. And trust me, we're not turning this into the limited, Cube resources show. Like we're talking plenty about the formats in question, but seeing where the future of the Cube was going and talking to Ryan and having that conversation was, I thought, incredibly valuable as someone who does love Cube and does anticipate playing a ton more of it. I thought that was a really cool episode to listen to.
He was awesome.
And having Ryan on, of course, one of the original co-hosts is incredible as well.
Yeah, I mean, we got the best of both worlds, right? We got a man on the inside now. I mean, he brought all of his hosting, communication abilities that made him a great co-host here on the show. But he also had access to information and ideas and ways of doing things that we don't, right? We don't get to see underneath the hood very often on how the vintage cube actually comes around and why things are there. And Ryan's position there has really upped the transparency. And I think for the Magic community and people that are into cube and stuff, that's really nice. It's really valuable to say, okay, I get it. Right. I was angry because there was this card in the cube. Well, here's why we did it. It's like, oh, well, that was pretty reasonable, and Ryan, he's not the type of person to come in and say, this is how we're doing it. And that's it. And then there's no, he's like, look, we take shots, we try things, we adjust, we ask people questions. We are kind of, water flowing over rocks, right? We're not trying to bang our head into the wall on this stuff. We're figuring it out as we go. And we're, constantly tweaking and adjusting and trying. And, and he also teased some cool stuff that, could come down the pipe for Cube as well. And then also, just getting a chance to sort of see how his design development brain works is really cool too. That was a great episode. We're going to have him back on to talk more Cube, by the way. We've got a bunch of questions from one of our patrons that we're going to do an episode with him on. So that'll be cool.
Sounds great.
Wow. What a year for us too, huh, Luis? Lots of YouTube stuff going on, lots of Cube talk.
Yeah, this has definitely been an interesting year when it comes to Magic. And I'm certainly loving it. I mean, I think this was an awesome year. And overall, I'm very happy with both the Magic landscape and my part in it going forward.
Yeah, man, you're
competitive play is competitive play. I'm always going to love it. And I'm going to, I'm planning to attend the next Pro Tour in Chicago, though. I only have my one Hall of Fame invite. So if I do poorly there, then that might be it. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm playing in the regional champs in Denver too. So I have 2 shots to queue for the next PT. But
oh God, I hope you do, man.
I know I know if you have to go to these without me or Gian there, that's gonna
I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Well, I'm
gonna bother Maria endlessly is what's gonna happen. Yeah. She's gonna be like, leave me alone. Yeah.
But exciting year, and I have felt very plugged into Limited this year and been playing a lot of it. So that's been cool. Cons came back. That was pretty neat.
That was really great. Yeah,
the
Arena Opens have been a highlight. Yeah, they really seem to have nailed the formula on those. Every time somebody mentions one, oh, there's one this weekend, I'm in. I just do it. I'd never miss one. I love playing them. Yeah, great stuff this year for us Limited fans for sure. And hopefully things continue into the next year. And we did, of course, want to say thank you to each and every one of you who listens to the show and has been hanging out with us for so long. It's so funny to, when the show's been around for as long as it has, to have people who are kids and now they're grown-ups when they listen, or, they say, oh, I've been listening for this long, or I remember this episode way back in the day. And I'm like, wow, like that puts you as truly an old school listener. And we really appreciate it. Luis and I do this show because we love to do the show. That's the bottom line. And we love bringing you value, and we love hanging out with you every week. And we appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. So thank you very, very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. And here's to another great year of Limited resources and another one coming up. We want to thank our sponsors once again, everybody on Patreon, as well as the kind folks over at ultimateguard.com as well, for supporting us. And we're really looking forward to next year. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast over at lrcast.com, including all the episodes of the show, including episode 700 with Ryan, which is still very much relevant. And you can check that out over there. And with that, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year.
The only thing you didn't mention is today's your birthday.
It is my birthday today as well.
So happy birthday, Marshall, from
Thanks,
me
buddy.
and of course the loving fans, and maybe some of the ones that don't like us but still listen because the information is too good. I don't think there's that many of those actually. But besides mentioning your birthday, I wanted to mention what we're doing for New Year's. It's actually started to become a tradition. It's casino night, and the way it worked last year, the way it's going to work this year is we set up, everyone who comes in gets a bucket of chips, the same amount, right? And then we have games set up you can wager chips on. So we have blackjack. This year we're going to have crokinole. Our friend Squirrel sent us a crokinole board. That's like one of those like old party games where you like try to like
you like slide those little kind of things
like,
around. Like,
it's a little bit like curling, but on a board with like little discs. I actually got all the Gold Border World Championship decks, like 60 of them from Martin Yuza. And so
that's
I'm going to have those
cool.
set up where each person who wants can play against someone else, randomize which decks they each get. And you hope you get the Tinker deck and they get the Sukkata Lancer deck. So
I want the Sukkata Lancer deck. That's the one with
the Manowar, the 5-color Manowar deck.
Yeah, I love that deck. Oh, that's great.
And we have Pai Gow. We have a big bag of all these old Magic packs, and you just each take one and then open each, and each player opens a pack and then builds 3-card decks where you have infinite mana, and the decks play against each other. And if you win more of the battles, then you're the winner. So it'll be fun. And then at the end of the day, or end of the night rather, we have whoever has the most chips gets to pick from these prizes. That we have some, and other folks who are coming will bring some prizes. So
that sounds super fun.
A fun way to ring in the new year. I'm going to try to have the cube set by then, but I don't think that's going to necessarily be part of it. It's kind of hard to get 6 or 8 people to cube during a New Year's party because everyone wants to hang around. But yeah, it was fun last year. It'll be fun this year, and honestly, it's been an awesome year. So to many more.